This is the AM show. Welcome back. We head into our big stories. And Speaker Alban Sumana Kingsford Bagbing has taken on the executive and the judiciary, accusing them of colluding to undermine the legislature, insisting no one would be allowed to destroy the institution. And yet, there's another stalemate expected as the NDC seeks to maintain its hold on the majority position in the House as Parliament returns today. What does this bode for the governance of our country, for the governance of the state? Well, joining me for a conversation from the Parliamentary Network Africa, we have Sami Obeng. Sami, good morning.
Good morning, Ben.
It's good to have you join the conversation. I think since that last event organized by the West Africa Civil Society Institute, we've not met. I hope you're well.
No, we haven't.
I hope you're well.
Very well. Thanks for asking.
Okay. You'd have to speak up. You're drifting off a bit. I'd like to find out from you, first off, before we even get to what the Speaker said yesterday, these developments over time, the executive, the legislative arm, and now the judiciary involved, what is your appreciation of these matters so far, how they have happened?
Well, it's been brewing all this while. And I think that we did not take it as seriously as we should have right from the very beginning. Remember that the executive, legislature, judiciary relationship has not been the best in this last 4 years. Right from some of the rulings that came out from the Supreme Court relating to who can vote, if presiding in the House, to striking out portions of the standing orders of the Parliament of Ghana,
right,
to issues around budget allocation from the executive to Parliament and the judiciary and what have you. These matters have been simmering for a while, and I think that we could have been better off if the leaders of the three arms had taken more proactive steps at addressing these issues and trying to have a meeting of the mind much earlier. In some of the instances, they did. You recall that the judiciary and legislature have had to meet around how to execute issues around arrest and serving of court processes to members of parliament. And now the CJ has come out with a notice in that regard. There's been times when the Speaker has had to meet the President to discuss some important national matters where there seems to have been disagreement between the two arms and what have you. It is not unusual to have, the arms of government being at each other's throats, so to speak, on matters that they disagree on. This is meant to happen in any democracy, especially when all three arms are seeking to assert their place and authority and to distinguish themselves as co-equal branches of government and not subservient to another arm. These things are meant to happen. However, the process through which we deal with them when they happen will be the true test of our democratic resilience. And I think that the arms may not have done too good a work in that regard.
If you follow what, and I know you did, what the Speaker of Parliament said yesterday, one of the points he made forcefully was that he was not doing this for himself, but he was doing it to protect the institution of Parliament. What do you make of what the Speaker said yesterday?
On that score, yes. And look, every speaker, in fact, every parliamentarian, parliamentary staff, leader in Parliament, and even those of us civil society organizations that do out-and-out parliamentary work would do whatever it takes to protect the test of Parliament or the legislative arm in such a way that it does not get encroached into, in such a way that the executive does not see themselves as dominant and Parliament being subservient and what have you. And so the Speaker coming very hard at that is not surprising, especially for a Speaker who has perhaps spent his entire adult life in this arm, of government predominantly. And that is why, for us, some of us found it very surprising that in the past, some members of the legislature themselves have done things to undermine the legislative authority and the legislature in general when they belong to that arm of government and must be seen to be, defending the arm of government, protecting itself, and making sure that it accepts its proper and true place in the democratic governance architecture that we've got in our country. So it wasn't surprising at all that the Speaker went on and on about that. Every Speaker will do the same, by the way.
He suggests some collusion between the executive and the judiciary. Is that assertion on the back of what you've seen, especially over these last 4 years? Is it justified?
To come from the Speaker, the leader of one of the three arms, alleging collusion, joint collusion, against his arm, so to speak, by the two others, was for me quite strong. Public perception can portend so far as these matters are concerned. Of course, members of the public, it's no news that trust in the judiciary, and not the entire judiciary, but particularly the Supreme Court, has been waning for some time now for many things that have happened. So there is public perception around that. There is public perception around what the Speaker spoke about. But to have the Speaker put more like a seal of endorsement on it, was quite, in my opinion, wild. Perhaps the Speaker could have drifted from that, in my opinion.
You say perhaps the Speaker could have done what?
Drifted from, stating it in that particular manner. Just so that, because now it's almost like an endorsement of the public perception in town by no mean a person than the Speaker of the Parliament of the Republic of Ghana. And that's quite wild.
It is quite wild, but if he realizes, and in his position, there's a lot that he will get to know that we probably wouldn't. If he thinks these two entities, these two arms, and by the way, when it comes to the separation of powers and, to ensure that balance in the system, the administration of government, they are supposed to be co-equal, not subservient. You get it? So if he feels the rights, the privileges, the work of Parliament is being impugned, should he, for the sake of peace, overlook it, which could lead to further erosion, or should he put his foot down? What do you think?
Not overlook, but I think there could be other means in dealing with the matter, or other ways in dealing with the matter. Remember that in our Ghanaian tradition, and generally, I mean, if the chief and his elders have issues, you would not really generally expect that these would be issues that will be put out non-proverbially in the public domain. Even if it is spoken to in the public domain, it will come close in some proverbial arrangement so that the people involved will be able to understand it proverbially and deal with it in that context. The Speaker has the right to his own opinion, and so nobody can take that away from him. I'm only saying that sometimes in stating our opinion or our verdict on things, it may have far-reaching consequences. And for me, as a Ghanaian, and as an investor, for other people, for foreigners, for other Ghanaians, other investors, if the verdict from the Speaker of the National Parliament about the judiciary and the executive branch is one that shows or points to collusion, then I will be minded in investing in that particular country. I'll be minded in how I get into cases with the executive branch. I'll be minded about all of those things. And that can be quite dangerous overall.
He talks about this supposed collusion meant to weaken Parliament or the legislative arm. Do you feel within this this second, fourth term, or the second 4-year term of the MPP, has Parliament been weakened in any way? The interesting thing is that he, of course, is from NDC stock. And so you can say that some things, it wasn't a free way for the ruling administration. But do you feel some of these actions chip away at the sovereignty, so to speak, of the legislative arm, especially considering that he is saying that some of the actions of the executive are wrong, for which reason he's asked that the proper human sexual rights, values and all of that, the bill be retransmitted to the executive. I mean, all of that is in there. Has Parliament been any weaker?
Well, Ben, remember that I work with Parliamentary Network Africa. I am a student of legislatures and the parliamentary institution. And so I have of the three arms of government, I have my biases that favor the legislative arm. In fact, I am of the school of thought that it is perhaps and by far the most important arm of the three. And so by the nature of my work and my own principles and worldview of things, so far as the governance architecture and the arms of government is concerned, I am a proponent for the continuous strengthening of the legislative arm of government. So anything that seeks to affect the proper functioning, the abilities to do its work, the strength of the legislative arm of government is one that you have me certainly speak against. For which reason, yes, I agree with Mr. Speaker when he says that there's been acts that had sought to, weaken the legislative arm of government. And some of these acts may not necessarily even be the things that are within the public domain. We know how, the executive branch tries to influence it to become leaders in the House who lead the committee because they probably are not in agreement with a particular committee chair and how he goes about his things. There are issues around budgetary allocation, and apart from the budgetary allocation, issues of when the releases, disbursements get done to Parliament in such a way that it stifles the work of Parliament in a way. There are issues around the very, very obnoxious decision by His Excellency the President and the executive branch to not accept the transmission of a bill that has been properly passed by Parliament and not going by what the Constitution says so far as disagreeing with the parliamentary lawmaking decision is concerned. These things certainly, and of course, how even members of Parliament themselves, depending on what side they fall, have either supported these things when they happen or gone against those things purely based on partisan political convenience rather than the goal of strengthening the institution of Parliament. So there's been many unprecedented things that have been done during this last 4 years which has chipped off the strength of Parliament. And one would argue that, but these things are to be expected when you have a Parliament that is led by somebody who is not a member of the executive branch. Well, in the future, we may have some of these instances, and that is the more reason why when these things happen, we must deal with them head on in such a way that we would not have the repercussions of these unattended to issues coming back to haunt us in the future.
Now, if you look at this influence you speak of, even within Parliament, do you think it is so palpable because we have a system where predominantly members of Parliament are also members of the executive? You know what I mean? Ministers, yes. A chunk of them picked from Parliament. Does that create the situation? Does it in any way impinge on the independence of Parliament? And should we be looking to change that?
It does, and of course, I again belong to the school of thought, and we've espoused it severally, even as Parliamentary Network Africa, that constitutional provision that requires 50% and more of ministers coming from Parliament is completely useless now. It has outlived its usefulness. The reasoning behind it from the Third Republican experience that informed that is untenable now, and it is one of those things that necessarily must be kicked out of our Constitution at the next available opportunity. because it does not produce for us legislators who are thinking about the legislative branch as the place of focus. It rather produces a group of people who are using the legislative arm as a springboard towards catapulting them into the executive arm. And we've seen how people who have focused on the legislative arm through and through have really performed. And there is evidence in Ghana. We can name quite a number of legislators who are your legislator's legislator, you know, because they focus on the executive, on the legislative branch, and did not seek to find favor or place in the executive branch, for which reason they performed creditably, and their name will forever be etched in gold so far as our Ghanaian parliamentary arrangement is concerned. You can speak about Aswanse MP, Mustafa Mubarak, after he left the executive, became part of legislature almost full time. You can talk about the likes of Dr. Kluchi Alvegi. You can talk about even the likes of Kweku Kwasing after he left the executive and focused exclusively on the legislative branch. And how that exclusive focus, you know, brings out the power and ability to be able to serve the people of Ghana well through that equally important arm of government, the legislative arm. So yes, that provision in our constitution is completely a major contributor to what we are seeing in the system that makes the executive branch look like the senior brother among the three arms, when it is supposed to be one of the triplets.
Now, just to conclude the conversation, two quick questions. One, Parliament reconvenes today. What are your expectations? And two, based on what the Speaker has now said, so we see the trajectory as far as the executive, we see the trajectory as far as the judiciary. Now, the legislature is also digging its feet in. Where do we go from here? So first question, Parliament reconvenes today. What are your expectations? Secondly, with the posturing of the three arms of government, where do we go from here?
So the man who is supposed to hold the balance in Parliament, the Speaker himself, when asked this question, this is your first question yesterday, he says he did not know what to expect today. And I truly fall within that same space. It's quite murky. Remember that some of us endorsed the decision of Mr. Speaker to adjourn the House Senate with the intent to allow for cool heads to prevail, allow for reaching out across the aisle, conversations among the two sides of the aisle in Parliament, including getting important stakeholders, you know, involved in the conversation to bring this to an amicable solution, so that when the House is reconvened, naturally, all of these things will not be met. Unfortunately, from the comments of the Speaker and from what we have seen and heard, knowing what I know within the spaces that I work in, not much has happened. All that has happened is triggering a constitutional provision that allows for a recall, for which reason we are not too sure whether the circumstances that led to the adjournment, the disturbances of that particular morning about 2 weeks ago, will not prevail again when we have the House coming back. And
right.
It will be most unfortunate if it so does. It will show a group of leaders who only think party first and do not think about us and the things that must happen in Parliament. And that will be one of the lows of this Parliament if we allow it to happen. Of the three arms of government, your second question, to answer that briefly, I think that now it is very clear that all the three arms have very critical and important roles to play in the impasse that has engulfed us at the moment. The Supreme Court, as the apex court of the land and the leading court within the judicial arm, has a responsibility to adjudicate the matter that is before it and adjudicate it in a manner that makes for makes for fairness, makes for collective appreciation of the fact that these are rulings that will stand the test of time and will take away that perception of bias, you know, in its way of doing things. And I trust that the Supreme Court can be able to do that. Yes, the ruling may eventually favor one school of thought. But for me, if that school of thought that gets favored by the ruling is the ultimate school of thought that must prevail, then so be it. Ghana will be better for it. The executive branch has 2 more months from now, today being the 7th of November, to finish with its 4-year tenure. And they have every responsibility to ensure that they are holding the country together, reaching out to Parliament proactively, doing the right thing to ensure that government business in Parliament does not get stalled, and so they have that responsibility. And if that means that His Excellency the President must come down from his throne, so to speak, and reach out to the legislature proactively, he must, because it would be his government that will be worse for it if things does not go well. Of course, the legislature, the least said about it, the better, because I have espoused what their own role will be. They must show us in today's gathering and subsequent gathering that they are truly the house of representation. Representation of who? The people, and not the political parties that elected them into Parliament.
Sami, before you go, and we'll be crossing over to Parliament shortly, our parliamentary correspondent Kweku Asante will be giving us, the state of affairs there. These are actually what you're seeing on your screen now. These are live visuals from Parliament today. But before we go there, just finally, you mentioned that reaching out across the aisle is a better way. Some people have said that if it were Osei Mensah-Bonsu at the helm of the MPP in Parliament, he had a way of, tactfully dealing with these matters. Do you feel Afenyo Markin could learn more of that, or do you feel he could have managed the situation better?
Short answer, yes.
Short answer, yes. What's the long answer?
Ben, I think the long answer is embedded in your question. It is not for nothing that we keep advocating for experience in parliamentary leadership, because it gets to a point where you have to go into your repertoire of experience and events of the past,
right,
to be able to pick out, that magic one that worked when you met the JH Owusu champions and the JH Mensahs and the Barbarians of our times, and how they dealt with these matters. The experience really matters. It doesn't mean that inexperienced people should not get the opportunity to also learn the ropes and come into leadership.
Okay.
But you can do that also by recognizing that Parliament is the House of Records. A lot of the things that happens in Parliament may have probably happened in the past. The records have shown how they were dealt with in the past, which made them better or worse, and then also going about dealing with them in that same manner. And I think Jay himself, in his recent interview with Evans on your channel, acknowledged that he would have dealt with the matter differently if he was the leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Samuel Bing, for joining the conversation, for enriching our conversation this morning. Samuel Bing is Executive Director of the Parliamentary Network Africa. Thank you so much, sir. Well, I now connect to our parliamentary correspondent, Kweku Asante. Those are live visuals from Parliament. Kweku, if you can hear me, when exactly is Parliament set to start its business today, and what can you report from there today? Can you hear me, Kweku Asante?
You can see about 40 NDC MPs, or close to that number, have already taken their seat, and true to their word, they are taking the seats on the majority side of Parliament. And so the pews you see, that side is the right-hand side of the Right Honourable Speaker, and that is where the NDC MPs have taken. They say that they are the majority. You see there, their leader himself, Dr. Cassia Latofos, and the Chief Whip, Kwame Govern Saguja. You see Zaneto Ajman-Rollis, you see Sam George, you see a number of their colleagues have already taken their seats, waiting for more of their colleagues to join. Unlike the last time where this brouhaha happened in Parliament, there is not a single NPP MP inside this morning. We do not have any inkling as to what their strategy is, or whether or not they are coming at all for today's sitting, and if they do come, would they take the minority side of the chamber, or they will perhaps draw the speaker's attention to the arrangement that have happened and insist that it be taken back to the majority side. Yesterday, we did hear from the Speaker of Parliament himself, who insisted that when it comes to arrangement, in terms of how the MPs sit in Parliament, that is not his job. And he has absolutely no inkling, no idea as to how that will be done. And so he is not ready to go into those matters. And so the Speaker of Parliament has already given notice from yesterday that when it comes to where people sit, whether they are the minority, they are the majority, the sides of the House, it is not something that he will be concerning himself in that no-holds-barred press conference that he had read yesterday in Parliament to respond to a number of the issues that have happened right from when the Supreme Court stayed his decision on those 4 MPs. So that is the development when it comes to that. The other option that is available to the NPP MPs is to come and take the minority side. The House insists they are also the majority, but sit on the minority side and still get government business transacted, because, as it were, some would say that is the most important thing. And you see it there, totally empty, the minority side, only a few staff trying to make sure that the microphones are in check for the sitting to commence in the next 2 hours. And so the pews have been empty. The last time Parliament sat, not a single MP from both sides took the side of the minority benches. It has become like a pariah in Parliament because no one is willing to take their seat there. The majority side has become the hot cake in Parliament, with both sides going in there to try and get to sit. So like I was telling you earlier, not a single NPP MP, I should say, has come here. The last time they were here as early as 5 a.m., led by the Chief Whip. A number of them, they did go inside. They took the majority side. There were accusations that they had sidestepped the authority of the clerk to Parliament, who had issued a circular that the House was only going to open its doors at 8 o'clock a.m. Later on, when the military came in to do the sweeping, they did get out, and then ultimately, when they all entered, they entered from the majority side. All of them took that side until the NDC MPs overwhelmed them, and they actually eventually boycotted proceedings and left. And so we do not have an idea what exactly the strategy is for them today, and if they will come at all. They are the ones who requested this emergency sitting of the House. And so all the key government business that have to be done, they have to come here and lead it. And remember, the last time the Speaker of Parliament adjourned the House indefinitely, he did say that he had done so because the House did not have a quorum. The House did not have a quorum because if all NDC MPs were present, they were only 136, or even if you added the one MP whose seat was declared vacant, that is 137. That is not enough to form the correct number to take decisions in the House. And so he adjourned Parliament indefinitely. And pursuant to that, the NPP MPs triggered the constitutional provisions that allow them to recall Parliament, and that is why we are here. 2 weeks ago, they did request that the Speaker of Parliament has acquiesced and has recalled Parliament to reconvene today. And they are not here. So that will be interesting, whether or not the NPP MPs who requested this sitting will show up today or not. That is something that we'll see in the next few hours, especially because they have to come in here and prosecute business. And if the President, that is Speaker of Parliament, late the last time, is anything to go by, with just NDC MPs on the floor, he will not allow business to go on, because that is not the correct number. So NDC MPs who are already in the chamber having conversation. You see there the MP for Wenchi and his colleagues, MP from Navrongo, and there's also Abednego Bandim. They're all having conversations among each other, tete-a-tete. A lot of talks ongoing. The leader himself trying to have a conversation with some of the MPs who have already reported and are in the chamber to sort of discuss their strategies. We do not have an idea if they did have a caucus meeting prior to this. The last time there were some chats that was circulated on social media, purported to be the messages on the NDC WhatsApp platform, the MPs, and they came out to deny at the time. They said that those were not messages from their platform. And so you see the Emmanuel Amakofiboa and a number of them who have all arrived. The numbers keep coming in, and a number of them keep walking in one by one, and sending the number a bit high. So, Benjamin, that is the situation here in Parliament. About 40 NDC MPs have arrived. They've taken their seats. They have taken the majority side. They insist they are the majority in Parliament. No NPP MP is currently in sight, and we expect that they will come in pretty shortly. I've just seen NDC MP for Medina, Francis Xavier Susu, who's also walked in. So in the next 1 or 2 hours, we will get to see what the situation will be. Will the NPP MPs turn up and show up and come and do government business because they requested this, or they will not because they do not want to take the minority side of the House? This is all the issues we'll get to know in the next few hours when the Speaker of Parliament himself takes his seat and governs the House in session. Benjamin.
Sante bringing us live scenes from Parliament and letting us know what exactly is happening there. As you can see, one more time, members of the NDC caucus have taken the majority side in Parliament. Over 40 of them, they are seated. There's no sight of any of the ruling administration's members of Parliament. And if that is anything to go by, the Speaker could, on precedent, like Sante mentioned, not allow government business to continue because the quorum has not been formed. And members of the ruling administration in Parliament are not on the floor. But that's our reportage from Parliament for you this morning. That's our discussion. As things develop, we'll bring you the status of that. We're taking a break. When we return, we have more conversations coming your way. In fact, when we return, it's AM exclusive, and it's that exclusive conversation on the back of the birthday of King Charles III, the British monarch. Today, it's an engagement between yours truly and Harriet Thompson, who is the British High Commissioner to Ghana. That after the break.